So moving on and looking at the Future Timber Hub structure and the way projects would get approved. So the Centre for Future Timber Structures Board has been working on a new governance structure moving forward for the next 5 years. So the aim of this new structure is to put more emphasis on industry leading the projects. So we have industry partners would be made up, would formalise the executive board and also formalise the steering group technical committee of the Future Timber Hub. So the technical committee is the main driver of the hub activities. And within that, we would have industry partner representatives, ideally 2 representatives per company. That's a partner of the Centre for Future Timber Structures, the hub. And the academia representatives, ideally 2 representatives per site university. So within that, we would have the chair and deputy chair. So the chair would be made up of industry and the deputy chair would be the academic, as well as the hub manager. So the chair and deputy chair would also make up, would sit on the executive board, and the executive board would be made up of industry directors, executive sponsors of the centre, and that's where you'll see the steering group committee chair and deputy chair. As well as the hub manager would be the secretary for the executive board and the steering group technical committee. So the way the idea works is that the Future Timber Hub is made up of facilities and skills from its site universities, site research providers, its partner universities, and industry. And it's not just its industry partners, but it's all of industry, because you don't have to be an industry partner to support a project in the Future Timber Hub. You can join on an individual project. So some of our, in the ARC Future Timber Hub, some of the partners, that we have other partners that are on sub-projects within the hub, but are not overall Future Timber Hub partners. So together, you would formulate a project idea, and then that project idea would go to the steering group technical committee, and that's where the project would be reviewed and approved, and we would look at the fund apportionment from the Centre for Future Timber Structures. Centre for Future Timber Structures leveraged funding. So that's where we would decide on which projects would go ahead. And then the final approval would go to the executive board, where they would be given the recommendations of which projects that we're going ahead with, and they would give final approval of the budget for those projects. So that's the whole way the cycle works. So it provides a structured collaboration between the universities, partner universities and industry, where all the combined use of facilities and skills are able to be accessed for industry-led timber projects. So we're looking at creating a national, international level of collaboration in this area. So when someone has a project idea, they would come to the Future Timber Hub, and that's where the collaboration would start. So to moving on, the next slide probably explains how it works a bit better. So again, we are looking at the Future Timber Hub being a collaboration between site universities, research providers, industry partners, industry and partner universities and other research providers. So we've brought together a group of people that are passionate about timber, and within that, we would have projects that have been created or projects that are going to be created, and that would be would ideally form a project technical subcommittee. So that would be made up of people that representing the timber industry. So we're looking at industry partner universities. But within those project subcommittees, they feed the industry partners and the site universities, who would overall formulate the steering group technical committee, where the projects would be approved for funding by the Centre for Future Timber Structures. So the partner universities would work with the site universities to formalise project ideas. Partner universities would work with industry partners, and they would also work with industry. Industry, outside of being an industry partner, would again work with other industry partners. They would work with our site universities, and they would work with the partner universities. So together we would formalise the projects which would get approved by the technical committee. So the site universities are the lead university who administers the funding. So for instance, we are looking to apply for another ARC Industrial Transformation Research Hub later this year. And the ARC Future Timber Hub was administered by the University of Queensland, because they were the lead university in that application. So this year again, they are looking to be the lead university on that application. So they would be the ones who would administer the funding that we receive from the government. And going forward, looking at other research providers, just to give you an example, that could represent, say, the FWPA, CSIRO, and looking closer to home, looking at the National Centre for Timber Durability and Design Right. So we would work with them on formulating project ideas that secure funding opportunities under the Centre for Future Timber Structures, aka Future Timber Hub. So to become a centre industry partner, there's two ways to join. You can either be an executive sponsor of the centre. Now, an executive sponsor, they have the final say on the projects and the apportionment of the projects, but they also have more of a say in the strategic vision of the centre and the way forward, because they're paying more money into the centre, they have more of a say on the way it should grow. So the executive sponsor level is up to $150,000 per vote, and that's over a 5-year period. Also, we're looking at the fact that if you have more incline than cash, we can do twice the incline equivalent would equal $1 in cash, or variation of the two to equal the $150,000 cash. So partners can choose to increase their sponsorship level, therefore increasing their votes and representation. The representatives will have a seat on the board of the centre, which is responsible for the strategic direction of the centre. And an executive sponsor will be able to have 2 representatives on the steering group technical committee per sponsor level of $150,000. So the centre research projects are governed by the steering group technical committee, which is made up of industry member representatives and the site academia representatives. And as always, there's possible research and development rebates for any investment in research. The standard sponsor is the next level down, which is up to $75,000 over 5 years, or twice the incline equivalent again. A standard sponsor will have 1 representative on the steering group technical committee, and the sponsor will commit or introduce research topics for at least 2 projects per year. So that's saying that basically when you become a sponsor of the Centre for Future Timber Structures, you either got 2 projects that are already have started, so you're committed to them, or you're looking into having at least 2 projects to start. So it just means you could be committed to 1 project, but there's always in the back you're working on another one to start. So it's just trying to create that constant flow of projects. The research projects are governed by the steering group technical committee, which is made up of the industry member representatives and the site academia representatives. And the site university research provider is the lead university that is involved in the centre research projects, and that a site university will administer the funding of the projects. And each site has at least one academic representative, ideally two. So the Centre for Future Timber Structures plans to leverage our partner funding. So to do that, we need to develop industry-relevant research project proposals that specifically target resolution of performance gaps and offer development of commercially viable, safe and sustainable timber-based solutions. And those research project proposals shall become the topic of applications to secure additional research grant funding. The Centre has looked at how it can continue out of funding periods, and to do that, we are looking to perhaps use 20% of the sponsorship funds to fund the CFT operations outside of funding periods. Ideally, this would not happen because funding would be ongoing with various opportunities that we apply for. But this would just be a backup to make sure that the operations of the centre can continue. So after the next 5-year iteration, we will be able to continue for another 5 years and so on. So just a little bit of information, the National Principles of Intellectual Property Management for Publicly Funded Research. The current ARC Future Timber Hub agreement, it states that the IP arrangements must take into account maximising the return of benefits to Australia, and unless otherwise approved by the ARC, comply with the National Principles of Intellectual Property Management for Publicly Funded Research. So I've just got a link there. I will be sending out a PDF of this presentation so you can also access the link to the various information. And just to further incentivize, I'd just like to reiterate about the research and development tax incentive. The research and development R&D is the government's key mechanism to stimulate the Australian industry's investment in R&D. The government sees R&D as the first critical step in innovation. It drives technological improvements that lead to productivity improvements and increased economic growth. So I encourage you to go to the business.gov.au website. There's a little link here on grants and programs, research and development tax incentive. And there's a video there, which is really good, a short guide to the research and development tax incentive, just to see how it all works and the benefits to your company to invest in R&D. And then looking further, we've got the funding opportunities. So this is the areas that we would like to leverage our partners' funds. So we've got innovation connections, ARC linkage projects. We can look at Advanced Queensland funding, the ARC Industrial Transformation Research Hub and Training Centres, Cooperative Research Centre projects, CRCPs, and Cooperative Research Centre programs, CRCs. So that's just an element of areas that we can look to leverage further funding with our partners' funds. And in 2021, the current ARC Future Timber Hub, which is an ARC Industrial Transformation Research Hub, will be in its final year, so it ends in December 2021. So later this year, we are looking to apply for another ARC Industrial Transformation Research Hub. So that will be a very good way of leveraging our partners' funding. So looking at the centre's scope of work, so the work of the centre has two components. So we're looking at the centre's common infrastructure, which is open access to all partners and non-partners. The knowledge and expertise generated by the common infrastructure will be available publicly with a view to ultimately benefiting the wider industry. So this work will leverage the funds of the centre via the successful application for grants. Then we can look further into separately funding individual projects established by interested organisations. These will be subject to individual agreements, and organisations funding individual agreements will benefit from the common infrastructure. But all project funding and commercially sensitive information could remain confidential to the funder of the project. So that's the two ways that we can set up a project under the centre. So just looking at the scope of work, so the idea is that we want to educate and develop required skill sets. We're looking at the materials, we're looking at the product performance, we're looking at systems, we're looking at solutions. We want to develop design approaches, and we want to influence, overcome the fear of the unknown. So with positive promotion and marketing, and also looking at technical guidance and guides.